computer. Okay, did you guys hear that? It said recording in progress. Okay, we're good to go. Thank you, Irina.
Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about naturalist intelligence, and there's a subtopic for the bigger topic on multiple intelligence. And interestingly enough, that naturalist intelligence was the last one to be added to that list of intelligence.
Oh.
Whilst from my personal perspective, probably it should be the first one. But anyway, let's start from our own interpretations or definition or understanding, experience, how we understand naturalist intelligence. What are your guys' thoughts on that? How do you interpret that? Can you give some examples from your personal experience of how you achieve or develop your natural intelligence? And first of all, what is natural intelligence to you? It is the form of knowledge, or it also includes intuition as per se developing like intuitive skills of having compassion towards nature and seeing everything as we are interconnected with nature as a system. So, so what are you guys' thoughts on that, on natural intelligences in general?
Okay, well, maybe I can start. Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. I watched the video you sent, Irina, and Nick is the guy. I think it's the first video I watched from him. It was, I think it was about 9 minutes or something. Maybe you can say later what his exact name is or the name of his YouTube channel. I haven't memorized that. What I wanted to say is in the first like 45 seconds of him talking, I kind of disagreed with some basic premise of what he was talking about. And within 2.5 minutes, I noticed that he was suggesting something that we will have to deal with in every meeting, which is a confusion between the mix and match of different intelligence, how they're interconnected. And I think that's accurate, but I think when we talk about the different ones, we should try to minimize that, because I think it's going to be confusing to people that we kind of reference other ones too much during each meeting where we're supposed to be specific on one. But we can always repeat, yeah, they're interconnected and they probably build on each other. Speaking of build on each other, to answer maybe your question, this would be a good answer, Irina, is at one point, Nick, during the video, he says, he was talking about somebody or something where I think the girl in the tree there, her naturalist or naturalistic or natural, I'm not sure what the term is that they're using yet, is it awoke. And then I think we'll have to be specific about each intelligence, whether it awakes or whether there's just like a giant gap forward in them once in a while. Or that they are built, built through choices of prioritizing them or meeting or spending time with the right people to, accelerate them or perfect them. And I think that's a concept, again, that would be coming back at every different type of intelligence, because I think naturally each one is within us naturally, and each one can be built, unless we have, an extremely defective brain, like from an accident almost, or a disability that's very extreme when we're born. I think both of those choices, awakening is already there, I think, and also in bursts, it'll come. That's separate from working on it in a particular way. When we become aware of that type of intelligence, and when we become aware of the interconnections between them, it makes the building and even the awakening of different types even more. And I think it accelerates at a point that it kind of feeds itself. That's kind of what I've kind of noticed, as a lifelong learner. Eventually it's like, oh, they're all going nuts, I think, is what I think is happening. But I disagreed with the premise and some of the things that this guy said. So maybe I'll talk about that later. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks for sharing. Glenn, do you have any feedbacks on it?
Okay, I'll just go for it. Well, I will just begin by defining what I mean with the word intelligence, and then I'll move from there into what natural intelligence could mean. So for me, intelligence is that which leads to something good in reality. So, and I do tend to view it from a behavioral perspective. So the focus will then be on something like intelligent behavior. And if there is intelligent thought, it will express itself in intelligent behavior. And intelligent behavior I would define as behavior which within the situation you find yourself is beneficial, it works well, it leads to good outcomes, both short term and long term, from a general consideration. So with this in view, it's clear that everything we call values is clearly related with this. And everything we call ethics is related with it. So it's a question of consequences, but not just consequences the next few minutes, but also consequences on longer time scales, not just consequences for me personally, but also for the larger system of which I'm a part. So something like intelligent action or intelligent behavior would be a way of being which, at least for the most part, would lead to good things. And an intelligent system similarly. So we could also view it as a system which is intelligent if it internally is sustainable, economical, but in terms of its interactions with the surroundings can generate mutually beneficent interactions. And so we could say a life affirming system, something that can work harmoniously in terms of quality of life in general. And I know that's a very big term, but so is intelligence. So, and I guess this also is to my next point, that intelligence for me is related to something that is mysterious. It's a very big thing. So I'm quite hesitant towards trying to reduce it to something less. So that would be my point of departure. And what does natural intelligence mean? Well, for me, that would be something that involves my whole nature and faculties of thought, the faculties of emotion, the faculties of sensing, of being aware of the surroundings. And something about how all these faculties kind of merge together into a sort of a general understanding. I think it's a little bit similar maybe to what Martin was mentioning, where there's a lot of different faculties that sort of blend together in a sort of general awareness or understanding impression of the situation you're in. So it's not something that it's being defined, but it shows itself in a response to a situation. So yeah, I think I'll just begin there. That's my point of departure. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I've just trying to extrapolate from the phrase of their, that something in naturalist intelligence could bring benefits, and that also would be my question: what kind of benefits, and what kind of frame of reference is it? Because is it beneficial for the humankind? Was beneficial for nature itself? So as we've been so much exploiting nature, and it seems to me that the progress of our civilization is thankfully to the exploitation of nature. And what is actually generally, I'm not saying that it's all people have the same definitions, but generally speaking, the quality of life that we are enjoying now, even people who are probably middle class people, is thanks to the exploitation of the nature at the global scale. So I've just extrapolate from that point is that so what is, how do we define beneficial? Is it systematically beneficial? Just like Glenn mentioned, actually, it's not only to individuals, right? So it must be extrapolated and considered as a system, like being beneficial to the system. Then how do we define those benefits, which is probably also needs to be balancing between the humankind's the benefits for humans and benefits for nature, because it seems to me that the modern life is the other way around, is like only probably or one way, right? One-headed one way is just mostly is just focusing on the benefits for humans. That will be just my extrapolation thoughts on that, and probably the question that somebody wants to grab in.
Oh, hey. Thank you again, Irina, for hosting this first meeting, and thank you for letting us know when the schedule was going to work for you. That's great. Glenn, your best answer so far was after you stopped talking and we could see trees behind you and you're walking in silence in the trees. I can tell you're looking at me now. You're not listening to heavy metal music, which defeats the purpose of walking in nature. You're listening to us talking about nature, so that's good. So that's cool that you're doing this at the same time as talking to us. Irina, you mentioned things and Glenn mentioned things. And for me, I haven't memorized the questions, so I'm going to participate in the conversation here where I'm going to say the links between what we're talking about. So Irina talked about something pretty important that we have to always reassess in every conversation with anyone is this good for, I call it homo communion kind, or you say humankind. Is this good for them or us, or is this good for the natural world, the biosphere, or us? Because, it's us at the same time. And the thing is just talking about this is enough to do 90 minutes. We don't have to do just this, and what I mean, for example, is if we follow even what the scientists are saying, even the climate emergency scientists are saying, you can tell that it's more anthropocentric. It's really how to facilitate the business as usual status quo while incorporating a little bit of care and concern for Mother Earth, the biosphere that we depend on for life. So we can tell that kind of thinking leads to us being doomed and the biosphere being doomed. And it used to be that what is good for the biosphere is good for us, but I don't believe so anymore, because I believe we are missing a good balance of different types of intelligence to start doing what is good for the biosphere, which means stop hurting it in all the ways that most of our behaviors are, because we won't be able to adapt. We won't be able to adapt to suddenly do a 180 and do only what is good for the biosphere. So I believe we have already disconnected from this system of life to the point that we are, we're like an anti-life equation, if you want to go into DC Comics. Another thing I want to say is, Glenn, you talked about how different intelligence, including this one, relates to values and ethical, and how these are, manifested in behavior. And I think a lot of the ways that people evaluate for intelligence is sometimes sitting at a table and filling out a questionnaire, and it's not practical. Even if the choices are, would you do this, do its behaviors, still, we are smart enough as a species to devise 9 different tests that can test these forms of intelligence in behaviors, not us sitting at a desk and filling out questionnaires. Yet we don't do it, so we don't value intelligence. So Irina also sent us smartness, and at some point we'll have to kind of talk about intelligence or smartness or both and how to define them. And maybe that's kind of one of the things that could have its own meeting, smartness, how it's different. But again, these things must be evaluated in a practical way. And I don't want to participate in a conversation with people that consider themselves intelligent and yet they're incongruent. Their behaviors does not reflect it. If I see that they're open to it, say, well, don't you think maybe if you're like this, or you believe you have these values or this type of intelligence, that in that situation you told me about last week in your life, you would have made a different choice. And if I see they won't budge at all, which is 99% of people wouldn't budge if I put them in this situation where they have to challenge their own identity, then, I'm not going to participate. So again, it should be, hey, don't talk about intelligence unless we measure it in a practical way in our behaviors. You know what I want to start saying now that Glenn made me think about is that all of these types of intelligence, they might have a tipping point where they start building on themselves, and they're also set in a way that they feed into the lifelong learning, they feed into the other ones, and they're also at a interconnection level with the other types that suddenly, what emerges in this system of these different types of intelligence? A human kind of thinking brain. The hardware is there, but the software is when we focus on all of these different types and in a practical way. Of course, theory has to help us understand what that looks like, why we use these words to define this type, but in a practical way, and it becomes intuitive that we don't have to challenge each other too much on it. They're like naturally what comes out in our behaviors. And then suddenly a human brain pops out. And I tell you, I'm still traveling the world looking for that elusive Homo sapien that would have this good balance reflected in their behaviors. So that's what I want to say so far. And thank you.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I can follow up a little bit here. First, to this question of whether it's good for the human or good for the rest of nature. First thought that comes for me then is this sounds like a kind of false dichotomy in the sense that I guess maybe it depends on where we put the bar for good, but at least if I were to think of what would be a good human life, that would be a life of a human really feeling connected with all of nature and the whole living world of which we are a part, because this is the living world that we come from, and this is where we exist, and we are completely part of nature every single moment. We are nature every single moment. There's no way of ever getting out of nature. So the entire separation between human and nature, as if they were two different worlds, it doesn't seem to be actually the reality that I exist in. It seems to be a kind of construct of a thought, a kind of illusion, which is part of the typical human existence, that have thoughts, we have illusions, we have categories, we separate the world into these abstract divisions. And even that process itself is a part of nature. It is natural, and I don't think that that process in itself is unnatural. It is something typically human. However, I do have the impression that there is something about the way we humans relate with categories, with thoughts, with divisions, with abstractions, which has become very disharmonious. And I think then we're coming a little into this question of domestication that we touched upon earlier. I think we may all have some agreement that there is a kind of imbalance within the human being in terms of sort of the kind of life that we've developed, and that imbalance also shows itself in our relationship with the whole world around us. But in terms of what would be truly good for humans, I don't think there is a contradiction between that and what would be good for the natural world. And I just have to, go outside the door when I'm at home and I'm seeing an area where there's quite a few humans living. I can also see a lot of very beautiful trees and flowers, especially in this period of the year. And I can see that there are birds and insects that are thriving and singing beautiful music, actually, from the birds. It's very obvious to me that how much joy there is sort of in the natural world, just from having a tree close by. Like I'm having some trees behind me now, and it's such a joy for the people to just be in those surroundings. And it's such a joy to be able to see the birds and hear the birds. And I live with a cat, and to see the life of the cat, and sort of when the cat is happy, it's just a sheer joy. So I don't buy that there's a contradiction between the human interests and the interests of the natural world. I think that the real interest would be something like a harmonious relationship. And in that harmonious relationship, I also think that a part of the natural world and a part of natural intelligence is that there is a kind of continuous process of birth and death and renewal and transformation, so that in nature there's a continuous transformation. So the fact that we also sometimes use natural resources isn't in itself a bad thing, but if we do it in a way which doesn't allow the system to replenish itself, that's when it becomes a problem. So it's sort of about finding a kind of a balance. But at least this has been my experience, that the times when I am the most happy personally is when I feel that there's a sort of a balance between many things, and a balance between me and the environment. And certainly my happiest moments are when I'm feeling connected with nature on many levels. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I will just complement that. So this basically brings us back to the question of balancing, and if they're overuse or underuse. If we overuse our joy, or we underuse our tendency to have that joy, to see the joy in the natural world, in the natural surrounded. And why it seems to me that this is the underuse of the joy, while there is an overuse probably of something else that actually kind of like blinds it down, that joy that many people don't see. Because I would probably a little bit disagree. People living in urban area, they barely see nature. They barely know how a carrot grows. You know, they probably don't even prefer to hang out in downtown rather than to, you know, go and see the nature, even they have a spare time. So of course, there are different people, there are different tendencies, but overall, it seems to me that the benefits for humanity, is how our society is run, is kind of like prevailing the benefits for nature, and the fact check data is the sixth extinction that has been triggered by humans. I think that is pretty much the fact check that we can refer to see that disbalances. So yeah, that will be just my, I don't know, reflection on that, I guess. So so I'm not sure if there are any other thoughts on that. Otherwise, we can jump to the next question. Yeah, sure.
You know, I realize part of the answer I'm going to give now is my mood. You know, I'm in a place I don't really want to be. Glenn is in a nicer place. It probably has an impact on his answer, but I also know from Glenn's psychological profile that he has, you know, he doesn't have people push him away or dislike him. He has people liking him because he has a balance of feel good philosophy or spirituality, or reframing, or glass half full kind of thing. Irina disagreed a little bit with Glenn. I'm going to strongly disagree with Glenn. A little bit is, you know, where I am now, what time of day it is, you know, not really wanting to spend money here to be on the internet. But I'm going to disagree, and I'm going to explain why. And in a way, it's going to show, I believe, that I have a very strong connection to reality of the human condition. Now, when I say human condition, again, I'm not just talking about our species, which has very little humanity. Other species show more humanity if we define the word a particular way. So Glenn, yes, there are a lot of people that enjoy spending time in nature. I am one, there are others. But like Irina said, there are some that'll complain about a bug, they'll whine, they don't want to be there, they want to go back to the city. So right there, that is something to question. The other thing is that you were saying is that, well, you believe it's a given certain things, and yet, like you're saying, you are enjoying a tree. Do you realize that there are many people in the world that work cutting trees, and they cut trees where they see there's a bird's nest with little birds in it or eggs and other things living there, and the sound it makes, and other people would find that traumatic, and yet there's a lot of members of our species that will just do that. And then there are people